Okay, so in an earlier video, we talked about how many calories you need for endurance sport, and that was primarily geared for marathons, half Ironmans, and Ironmans. So what if you're doing something a little bit shorter? What about a sprint? What about an Olympic? What about a 5K? What about a half marathon? So some thoughts on shorter distances. If you're doing a sprint triathlon, for example, I think you'd probably be fine with having some breakfast, a gel or something similar prior to starting, maybe bringing some fluid on the bike, but do not fill the bottle all the way up. Most sprint bikes are going to take you somewhere between 30 to maybe 45 minutes depending upon how long they are. So you're not really going to need a full bottle of water, and you're probably going to be going so hard you're not going to need that full thing anyway. You may want to consider taking a gel in the last 5-10 minutes of the bike, which will set you up with some energy for the run. That's it, I'd say, for a sprint, though. It's a pretty low maintenance calorie intake. For most of it, it's going to take us somewhere from 1 to 2 hours, so we don't need a ton of calories for that duration. For an Olympic distance, now you're talking, over 2 hours, possibly into 3 for some of us. So this you're going to want to fuel a little bit more. You don't necessarily need to fuel it at the top levels like we were talking about for a half Ironman or an Ironman, but maybe you're at the lower end of those body ranges that we talked about, or maybe just slightly under. Most of your fueling you're going to be doing on the bike, where you can get that fueling comfortably. You're still going to be hydrating fully to whatever your sweat rate is, which we talked about in an earlier video. And then on the run, you may only need one or two gels if you're doing those. I like to use shot blocks on the run, regardless of the race that I'm doing, anywhere from a 5K up to a marathon. I like to use shot blocks, and I take each of those Cliff shot blocks are about 33 calories. So if I take one of those every 15 minutes, I'm getting the calories that I need per hour. And I find those shot blocks easy to get in. If you're thinking about, a 5K race, I would say something like that. You're really probably only going to need a gel maybe 15 minutes before the start, and that's going to get you through. Probably same thing with a 10K. You start getting into 10 milers and half marathons, you can think about taking a gel or Cliff shot blocks or whatever it is you need to keep those energy levels topped off, depending upon how long that effort's going to take you. In terms of hydration, you could be grabbing cups at the aid stations for those runs. Quick tip on the cups: if you have a hard time drinking out of the round cups, pinch them, and then it kind of goes in like a little funnel in your mouth. So those are some thoughts on developing a fueling plan for different sized races. There was also a question about specifically the kinds of things that John and I do in training. For me specifically, for a sprint, I do, as I've mentioned, I have a gel before and maybe a gel in the last 5 or 10 minutes of the bike. For an Olympic, I will use some Perpetuum for that, but I'll use slightly less calories. So I normally do about 300 calories per hour of Perpetuum for a half Ironman or an Ironman. For an Olympic, I might make that like 200 calories, and you figure the bike's going to take me about an hour, maybe a little over an hour, and I'll finish that bottle, maybe make it like an hour and a half bottle, and may or may not finish that bottle depending on how long the bike takes me. For the run, I'll use Cliff shot blocks. Half Ironman and Ironman, it's Perpetuum on the bike, sips in every 20 minutes, and then on the run, it's Cliff shot blocks. Second half of the run, I take in cola. On the bike, I will hydrate with about 2 bottles an hour with noon tabs. On the run, I will take water at most of the aid stations, if not all of them, depending upon how hot it is. In marathons, I do Cliff shot blocks the whole way, and water at the stations. If there are caffeinated products in the second half of the run on marathon, I will take them, like cola. If not, I'm fine with that as well. I almost always carry an emergency double caffeinated gel on my person, so if I start feeling my energy flag, I'll just kind of pop that gel in, get the boost of caffeine, and go on from there. In ultras, so when I do the double Ironmans or when I race 50 to 100 milers, I continue to prefer liquid calories as my primary mode. In the last couple of years, I've used Tailwind Nutrition as my sort of base level of calories. So I will typically get about 90 to 100 calories per hour from the Tailwind, and then I will supplement with in running races, running ultras, I will supplement that with Cliff Shots, or with little pieces of Cliff Bar, or potato chips, or watermelon. Usually in an ultra, if I feel like I need some food, I'll go up to the aid station and just kind of eat with my eyes. So whatever looks right is usually what you need. Sometimes I really love M&Ms in the middle of an ultra as well. In the double Ironmans, I do use Perpetuum on the bike, but as Tim will tell you, I get a little sick of that about 10-ish hours into the bike, at which time I really love chips. Funny story, he gave me Bonitos one time. If you know what those are, they're like the bean tortilla chips, and I told him he was on crack and he was crazy, and he said just try them, and I rode for like the next 2 hours purely eating Bonitos. They were amazing. On the run, again in the double as well as 100 milers, I do also really love grilled cheese in the later hours. I will eat a little quarter of grilled cheese. I know that John also likes the grilled cheese in the later hours. So that's just a sense of some of the fueling things that we do. If you have questions about that, because obviously there's more to it, I want you to think about these videos as a way to start a conversation, not as the end of the conversation. So please leave your questions in the comments, or send me an email at maria@nolimitsendurance.com. Thanks.